The moment she walked through the front door of that coffee shop on Maple Avenue, I felt every single year collapse like a house of cards. 10 years. 3,650 days. And there she was, standing under the same flickering fluorescent light where we had our first date, looking at me like no time had passed at all. But here is the thing that will keep you watching until the very end of this story. When my daughter saw her mother for the first time in a decade, she looked right through her like she was a stranger. She turned to me with those big brown eyes and whispered, "Dade, who is that lady and why is she crying?" That single sentence destroyed two people in that room simultaneously. Let me take you back to where it all started. My name is not important, but you can call me what my daughter calls me. Dad. That is the only title I have ever needed. I grew up in a small town outside of Nashville, Tennessee. My father was a mechanic who smelled like motor oil and honesty, and my mother was a schoolteacher who believed every child deserved to feel seen. They raised me in a house where the screen door never locked, and the kitchen always smelled like something good was happening. I learned early that love was not a word you said. It was a thing you did. You showed up. You stayed. You fixed what was broken, and you did not run when things got hard. I met her when I was 24. Her name was Sarah. She had this blonde hair that caught the sunlight like it was personally auditioning for a shampoo commercial. And she had a laugh that could make a funeral feel lighter. She was from Connecticut, the kind of girl who grew up with a country club membership and a trust fund she pretended did not exist. She moved to Nashville because she said she wanted to find something real. I think she found me because I was the opposite of everything she had ever known. I did not wear pressed shirts. I did not know which fork to use at a fancy dinner. I once showed up to her parents' house in boots that still had mud on them from a job site because I was working construction at the time and I did not want to be late. Her mother looked at me like I was something the dog dragged in. Her father shook my hand like he was trying to crush it. But Sarah, she just smiled at me from across that pristine dining room table and mouthed the words, "I love you." That was enough. That was everything. We got married when we were 26. Small ceremony, backyard wedding. My mother cried. Her mother did not come. We did not care, or at least I did not care. Looking back now, I think Sarah cared more than she ever let on. I think the distance from her family planted a seed of something restless inside her that I was too young and too in love to notice. Our daughter was born when we were 28. We named her Emma. She came into this world screaming like she had opinions, and she has not stopped having them since. She had Sarah's eyes and my stubbornness, and from the first moment I held her, I understood something my father once told me that did not make sense until that exact second. He said, "Son, you do not know what your heart is for until you have a child." He was right. Everything I thought I knew about love before Emma was just practice. The first 2 years were beautiful and brutal the way early parenthood always is. Sleep deprivation. Arguments about whose turn it was to change the diaper at 3 in the morning. Sarah struggling with something I did not have the vocabulary to understand at the time. She would sit in the nursery after Emma fell asleep and just stare at the wall. I would find her there at midnight, 2 in the morning, 4 in the morning, not crying, not sleeping, just sitting. When I asked if she was okay, she would say, "I'm fine," in a voice that sounded like fine had been hollowed out and filled with sand. I should have pushed harder. I should have sat down on that nursery floor and refused to leave until she told me the truth. But I was 28 years old, and I thought giving someone space was the same thing as giving someone support. I know now those are very different things. If you have ever made that mistake, if you have ever stepped back when you should have stepped closer, go ahead and hit that like button because this story is about to get heavier before it gets lighter, and I need you with me for the whole ride. Sarah left on a Tuesday. I remember it was a Tuesday because it was trash day, and I had dragged the bins to the curb that morning and waved at our neighbor, Frank, who was walking his ridiculous little dog, and everything felt aggressively normal. I went to work. I came home at 5:30. Emma was with the babysitter. The house was quiet, but not the good kind of quiet. The kind of quiet that has weight to it. I walked into our bedroom and the closet was half empty. Her side of the bathroom was cleared out. No toothbrush, no moisturizer, no that weird face roller thing she used every night. On the kitchen counter, there was a note. Not a letter, a note. 4 sentences. I cannot do this anymore. I am not the mother she needs. I am not the wife you deserve. Please do not look for me. 4 sentences to end a marriage. 4 sentences to abandon a child. I read that note 11 times standing in that kitchen, and each time I expected the words to rearrange themselves into something that made sense. They never did. The first week was shock. I moved through the days like I was underwater. My mother drove up from Nashville and took over with Emma while I sat on the back porch and stared at the yard Sarah and I had planted together. The second week was anger. White, hot chest, burning anger that made me want to put my fist through every wall in that house. The third week was grief, the kind that sits on your chest at night and makes you forget how to breathe. And then the fourth week, Emma looked up at me from her high chair with mashed sweet potato all over her face, and she laughed. She laughed this ridiculous, full-body, toothless laugh at absolutely nothing, and something inside me shifted. I could not fall apart because she was right there, whole and perfect and completely dependent on me to hold it together. So I did. I held it together with duct tape and stubbornness and more coffee than any human should consume, and I became a single father. Now here is where the story takes a turn that I need you to pay attention to because it matters later. About 3 months after Sarah left, I got a call from a number I did not recognize. It was a therapist in Portland, Oregon. She told me that Sarah had checked into a treatment facility for severe postpartum depression and related psychiatric conditions. She said Sarah had asked her to call me. She said Sarah wanted me to know she was safe, but she was not ready to talk. I stood in my kitchen holding the phone, and I felt 2 things at exactly the same time. Relief that she was alive, because part of me had been terrified of the alternative, and fury that she had the capacity to call a therapist, but not her husband, not the father of her child. I said, "Tell her Emma is fine. Tell her Emma will always be fine because I am here." Then I hung up and I did not hear from Sarah again for almost 10 years. Those years were the hardest and most beautiful of my life. I want to tell you about them because they matter. Emma grew up fierce. She was the kind of kid who asked questions that made teachers uncomfortable. Why do we have to color inside the lines? Who decided dogs can't come to school? Why did my mom leave? That last one came when she was 4. We were driving home from preschool and she asked it the same way she asked about the dogs. Like it was just another thing in the world that did not make sense yet. I pulled the car over because I did not trust myself to drive and answer that question at the same time. I turned around and I looked at her in her car seat with her juice box and her tangled hair and I said, "Your mom got sick, sweetheart." Not the kind of sick you can see, but the kind that happens inside your mind. And she had to go away to get better. Emma thought about this for a moment. Then she said, "Like when I had the flu and had to stay in bed." I said, "Yes, baby." Like that? She nodded and went back to her juice box. Kids are resilient in ways that will break your heart with their simplicity. But as the years went on, the questions got harder. At 6, she asked, "Is my mom dead?" At 8, she asked, "Did my mom leave because of me?" That one nearly killed me. I knelt down in front of her and I held her face in my hands and I said, "Emma, listen to me. Your mother's leaving had nothing to do with you. You are the best thing that has ever happened in this world. Some people get lost, and it is never the fault of the people they leave behind." She cried that night, and I held her, and I made a promise to myself that I would be enough. I would be the mother and the father and the friend and the safe place and the soft landing for as long as she needed me to be. I learned to braid hair from YouTube tutorials at midnight. I learned to make the pancakes she liked, the ones shaped like dinosaurs with chocolate chip eyes. I went to every school play, every soccer game, every parent-teacher conference. I was the only dad at the PTA meetings, and I will tell you something. Those women welcomed me like I was a returning soldier. They brought me casseroles and advice, and occasionally their single friends' phone numbers written on napkins, which I politely ignored for a very long time. I did eventually date again. Nothing serious for years. I was too scared of letting someone into our little world and having them leave. But when Emma was about 7, I met a woman named Rebecca at the hardware store of all places. She was trying to fix a leaky faucet and had brought in what I can only describe as a crime scene of plumbing parts. I helped her figure out which washer she needed, and she thanked me by buying me a coffee, and I thanked her by making her laugh so hard she snorted, which embarrassed her, which made me like her immediately. Rebecca was warm and patient, and she never tried to replace anything. She just added to what was already there. She and Emma became friends first, and that was important to me. She did not push. She did not pretend. She was just present, and presence is the most underrated form of love there is. Now I need to tell you about the day everything changed, because this is where the cliffhanger lives, and I am not going to apologize for what it does to your emotions. If you are still watching, drop a comment right now and tell me if you think Sarah deserved a second chance. I want to know where you stand before I tell you what happened next. Emma was 12. She was in that glorious, terrifying stage of girlhood where everything is dramatic and nothing is fair, and her bedroom door was always closed, but her heart was still wide open if you knew how to knock. She had stopped asking about Sarah by then, not because she had stopped wondering, but because she had built a life that felt complete without the answer. She had me. She had Rebecca, who had become a steady, gentle presence in our home by then. She had her friends and her soccer team and her obsession with marine biology that meant our house was full of books about octopuses and our bathroom had a shower curtain with whales on it. She was whole. She was happy. And then Sarah came back. I got the email first. It arrived on a Wednesday morning while I was making Emma's lunch for school. The subject line said, "I know I have no right." I almost deleted it. My thumb hovered over that delete button for a solid 30 seconds. But something made me open it, maybe curiosity, maybe that small, stubborn part of my heart that had never fully closed the door. The email was long. It was raw. It was the most honest thing Sarah had ever written. She told me about the 10 years, the treatment facilities, the diagnoses, the medications that worked and the ones that did not, the slow, agonizing process of rebuilding a mind that had tried to consume itself. She told me about the guilt. She said the guilt was the last thing she dealt with in therapy, because it was the deepest thing buried inside her. She said she had wanted to come back 1,000 times, but she was terrified that she would not be well enough to stay, and she refused to walk back into Emma's life only to leave again. She said she was stable now. She said she had been stable for 3 years. She said she had a job and an apartment and a therapist she saw every week, and she did not want to disrupt our lives, but she needed Emma to know that she had never, not for one single day, stopped loving her. I sat at that kitchen table and I read that email 4 times and I cried. Not for myself. For the waste of it. For the years lost. For the little girl who asked if her mother was dead. For the woman who was so sick she believed her own child was better off without her. Mental illness is a thief, and it does not just steal from the person who has it. It steals from everyone who loves them. I did not respond for 2 weeks. I talked to Rebecca about it first. She sat across from me at our kitchen table, and she listened without interrupting, which is a skill most people think they have, but almost nobody actually does. When I finished, she took my hand and she said, "This is not about you, and it is not about Sarah. This is about Emma. And Emma deserves the truth, whatever she decides to do with it." I loved Rebecca more in that moment than I thought possible. She was not threatened. She was not jealous. She was not thinking about herself at all. She was thinking about a 12-year-old girl who had a right to know her mother was alive and wanted to see her. I told Emma on a Saturday morning. I made the dinosaur pancakes even though she had told me she was too old for them, and she rolled her eyes, but she ate every bite. Then I said, "Emma, I need to talk to you about something important." She looked at me with those eyes that were so much like Sarah's it sometimes stole my breath, and she said, "You and Rebecca are getting married." I laughed despite the gravity of the moment and said, "No, not today. This is about your mother." The word hung in the air between us. Mother. A word that meant everything and nothing to her at the same time. I told her about the email. I told her the truth, all of it, in age-appropriate language that did not minimize the pain, but did not villainize Sarah either. I told her that her mother was sick and she went away to get better, and now she wanted to see her, but only if Emma wanted that too. Emma was quiet for a long time. Then she said something that broke me open. She said, "Dad, I do not remember what she looks like." 12 years old, and she did not remember her own mother's face. I had photos, of course. They were in a box in the closet, not hidden but not displayed. I had never known what to do with them. That afternoon, Emma and I sat on her bedroom floor and looked through those photos together. Sarah holding Emma in the hospital. Sarah and Emma in the bathtub, both covered in bubbles. Sarah asleep on the couch with baby Emma on her chest, both of them looking so peaceful it was like the world had not yet decided to be cruel. Emma studied each photo carefully, like a scientist examining evidence. Then she looked at me and said, "She looks tired in all of these." I said, "She was baby. She was very tired." Emma put the photos back in the box and said, "I will think about it." I said, "Take all the time you need." She took 3 weeks. During those 3 weeks, she was quieter than usual, not sad exactly, but processing. I could see the gears turning behind her eyes. Rebecca checked in with her gently, never pushing, just leaving the door open. Emma's soccer coach called me to say Emma seemed distracted during practice. Her best friend's mom called to ask if everything was okay because Emma had been unusually quiet at a sleepover. The whole world could see that something was shifting inside this child, and all I could do was stand close and wait. On a Thursday evening, Emma came into the kitchen where I was making dinner. She stood in the doorway with her arms crossed, which is the pose she adopts when she is about to say something she has rehearsed. She said, "I want to meet her. But I want you there. And I want Rebecca there. And I want to meet her in a public place because I do not want to be in a private space with someone I do not know." She was 12 years old, and she had the emotional intelligence of someone 3 times her age. I was so proud of her I could barely speak. I said, "That sounds like a very smart plan." I emailed Sarah. I told her Emma was willing to meet. I laid out the conditions. Public place. I would be there. Rebecca would be there. No pressure on Emma to hug or call her mom or perform any emotion she did not genuinely feel. Sarah agreed to everything immediately. She wrote back, "I will take whatever she is willing to give. Even if it is nothing. Even if she looks at me and feels nothing. I just need her to know I am here now." We chose the coffee shop on Maple Avenue. The same one where Sarah and I had our first date. I do not know why I chose it. Maybe I thought the symmetry meant something. Maybe I thought the universe owed us a moment of poetry after all those years of prose. The day arrived. Emma wore her favorite blue sweater and her hair in a braid I had done myself, which was slightly crooked, but she said it was fine. Rebecca drove because my hands were shaking. We arrived 15 minutes early because I am pathologically early to everything, a trait Emma has inherited and Rebecca finds both endearing and annoying. We sat at a table near the window. Emma ordered a hot chocolate. I ordered a coffee I knew I would not drink. Rebecca ordered nothing and sat with her hand on my knee under the table, steady and warm. Sarah walked in at exactly 2 o'clock. And this is the moment I described at the beginning of this story. She looked different and she looked the same. Her hair was shorter. Her face was thinner. She had lines around her eyes that had not been there before, but her eyes were clear in a way I had never seen. She looked like someone who had been through a war and survived it. She saw us and she stopped. She stood just inside the door and her hand went to her mouth, and her eyes filled with tears. And she looked at Emma, the way you look at something you thought you had lost forever. Emma looked at her, really looked at her. And then she turned to me and whispered, "Dad, who is that lady and why is she crying?" She did not recognize her. 10 years had erased Sarah's face from Emma's memory entirely. The photos in the box were of a younger woman, a different version. The person standing in front of her was a stranger. I watched Sarah hear those words. I watched the impact land. Her whole body absorbed it like a blow. But she did not crumble. She took a breath. She walked to our table. She sat down across from Emma, and she said, "My name is Sarah. I am your mother. And I am crying because I have missed you every single day for 10 years, and you are more beautiful than I ever imagined you would be." Emma stared at her. Then she said, with the devastating honesty that only a 12-year-old can deliver, "You missed a lot of stuff." Sarah nodded. "I had the flu last year and Dad stayed up with me for 3 nights straight. He is a good dad. He is the best dad. He learned to braid my hair from YouTube." Sarah looked at me and something passed between us that was not love exactly, but was not nothing either. It was acknowledgement. Gratitude. The recognition that I had done the thing she could not. The rest of that first meeting was awkward and beautiful. Emma asked Sarah questions like she was conducting an interview. "What is your favorite color? Do you like soccer? Do you know anything about octopuses?" Sarah answered every question earnestly, sometimes with a trembling voice, sometimes with a tentative smile. When Emma told her about the time I accidentally set the kitchen on fire trying to make a birthday cake, Sarah laughed, and the sound of it was so familiar, it made my chest ache. At the end of the meeting, Emma stood up and said, "Thank you for coming. I need to think about whether I want to do this again." She extended her hand for a handshake, with her own mother. Sarah took her hand and held it for a moment longer than a handshake requires and said, "Thank you for giving me this chance." We walked to the car. Emma was quiet the whole ride home. When we got inside, she went to her room and closed the door. An hour later, she came out and said, "Dad, can we have the dinosaur pancakes for dinner?" I said, "We can have dinosaur pancakes for every meal for the rest of our lives if you want." She almost smiled. Then she said, "She seems sad." I said, "She has been sad for a long time, sweetheart." Emma nodded. "Maybe I can help with that." And she went back to her room. Over the next several months, Emma and Sarah built something. I will not call it a relationship because that word implies a foundation, and they were starting from nothing. They built a conversation. Weekly meetings at first, always in public, always with me or Rebecca nearby. Gradually, Emma relaxed. She stopped conducting interviews and started having actual exchanges. She showed Sarah her school projects. She told her about her friends. She complained about her math teacher. Normal things. Ordinary, beautiful, mundane things that Sarah had missed and that Emma was generous enough to share. There were hard moments. There was the day Emma came home from a meeting with Sarah and said, "She keeps saying she is sorry. I do not want her to be sorry anymore. I want her to just be here." There was the day Sarah showed up to one of Emma's soccer games without asking first and Emma froze on the field, and I had to walk Sarah to her car and explain that boundaries existed for a reason. There was the day Emma found the note. The 4-sentence note Sarah had left 10 years ago. I had kept it in a drawer, not as a weapon but as a reminder. Emma read it and she looked at me and said, "She said she was not the mother I needed." Was she right? I sat with that question for a long time before I answered. Then I said, "She was not the mother you needed then. Maybe she can be part of what you need now." That is your choice, not mine and not hers. If this story is hitting you somewhere deep, if you have ever had to rebuild something that someone else broke, or if you have ever been the person who broke it and wished you could come back, subscribe to this channel because these are the kinds of stories we tell here. Real stories about real people who do not have all the answers but keep showing up anyway. Rebecca, through all of this, was extraordinary. She never competed with Sarah. She never positioned herself as a replacement. When Emma asked her once, "Are you worried my mom will take your place?" Rebecca said, "Sweetheart, I do not have a place. I have a choice. I choose to be here because I love you and I love your dad. Your mom has her own place, and it does not take away from mine." Emma hugged her so hard that Rebecca later told me she had bruised ribs, which she said with a smile that told me those were the best bruised ribs of her life. The turning point came on Emma's 13th birthday. She was having a party at the house. Friends, pizza, terrible music played at unreasonable volume, standard 13-year-old fare. Emma came to me the week before and said, "Dad, I want to invite Sarah." She did not say Mom, she still said Sarah. But the fact that she wanted her there, in our home, at her birthday, felt like a door opening that had been closed for a very long time. I said, "Are you sure?" She said, "No. But I want to try." Sarah arrived with a gift wrapped in paper that had octopuses on it, which told me Emma had made an impression. She stood in our living room looking around at the life that had been built in her absence. The photos on the wall, the soccer trophies on the shelf, the chore chart on the refrigerator with Emma's name and mine, Rebecca's jacket on the hook by the door. Evidence of a family that had formed without her. I saw her take it all in, and I saw the grief move across her face like weather. But she stayed. She sat in the corner, and she watched her daughter blow out candles and laugh with her friends, and she did not make it about herself. She just watched. Like someone standing outside in the rain, looking through a window at a warm room. After the party, after the friends went home, and the pizza boxes were stacked by the trash, Emma did something unexpected. She walked over to Sarah, who was helping me clean up, and she hugged her. Not a handshake. A hug. It was brief and a little stiff, and Sarah stood frozen for a second before her arms came up and wrapped around her daughter, and I watched 10 years dissolve in the space between two people who were learning how to hold each other again. Emma pulled back and said, "Thank you for the octopus paper. That was a nice touch." Then she turned and walked to her room like she had not just changed the entire gravity of our lives. That night, after Sarah left and Rebecca was reading in bed, I stood in Emma's doorway. She was lying on her bed staring at the ceiling, which is her thinking position. I said, "That was a brave thing you did today." She said, "Dad, can I ask you something?" I said, "Always." She said, "Do you still love her?" I leaned against the doorframe and I thought about that question honestly. Then I said, "I love who she was to me once, and I respect who she is trying to become. But the love I have now, the love that wakes up every morning and makes your lunch and drives you to practice and falls asleep on the couch watching documentaries about the ocean because you insist. In this house. With you and Rebecca." Emma smiled. "Good answer, Dad." Then she rolled over and said, "Also, you snore during the ocean documentaries." I said, "I am resting my eyes." She said, "You are unconscious." I said, "Good night, Emma." She said, "Good night, Dad, I love you." I said, "I love you more." She said, "Impossible." I closed her door and I stood in the hallway and I let myself feel all of it. The grief and the gratitude. The loss and the love. The 10 years that could have destroyed us but instead built something stronger than anything Sarah and I had together. Not because Sarah was the villain. She was not. She was a person swallowed by an illness that no one talks about honestly enough, and by the time she found her way back, the world had moved on without her. That is not villainy. That is tragedy. Here is what I have learned, and this is the message I want to leave you with. Forgiveness is not about the other person. It is not about saying what they did was okay. It is about putting down the weight so you can walk forward. Emma taught me that. A 12-year-old girl who extended her hand to a stranger who happened to be her mother and said, "Thank you for coming. I need to think about it." She did not forgive immediately. She did not reject completely. She gave herself the space to feel everything, and then she chose, on her own terms, how much of her heart to open. That is wisdom. That is strength. And it did not come from me or from Sarah. It came from somewhere inside Emma that I believe is the best of both of us. Sarah is in Emma's life now. Not as the mother she was, but as the mother she is becoming. They have lunch on Sundays. They text about octopus facts. Last month, Emma called her mom for the first time. She did not make a big deal about it. She just said it in passing, Mom sent me this article about a new species of deep sea octopus. She said it like it was the most natural thing in the world. And maybe, after all that time and all that pain, it finally was. I married Rebecca last spring. Small ceremony, backyard wedding. My mother cried. Emma was my best woman. She wore a blue dress and gave a speech that made every adult in attendance weep openly. She said, "My dad taught me that love is not about being perfect. It is about being present. He has been present every single day of my life, and now Rebecca is present too. And I am the luckiest kid in the world because I did not get the family I expected, but I got the family I needed." Then she raised her glass of sparkling cider and said, "To showing up." Every person there raised their glass and said, "To showing up." Sarah was not at the wedding. Emma had thought about inviting her, but decided it was not the right time for that. Boundaries. Even at 13, she understood them better than most adults. Life is not a straight line. It is a mess of detours and dead ends, and unexpected turns that take you somewhere you never planned to go. 10 years ago, I was a man standing in a kitchen reading a 4-sentence note, and I thought my life was over. It was not over. It was just beginning. Every dinosaur pancake, every crooked braid, every midnight worry, every school play, where I sat in the front row with my phone recording and my eyes leaking, all of it built a life I would not trade for anything. Not even for the years I lost. Not even for the pain. Because the pain made the joy sharper. The absence made the present sweeter. And my daughter, my fierce, brilliant, octopus, obsessed daughter, she made it all mean something. So if you are watching this, and you are in the middle of your hardest chapter, if someone left and you are trying to hold the pieces together, let me tell you something from the other side. You are enough. You have always been enough. And the fact that you are still here, still trying, still making the pancakes and braiding the hair, and showing up for the game even when you are exhausted and terrified, that is not just surviving. That is love in its purest, most stubborn, most beautiful form. Thank you for watching this story all the way to the end. It means more to me than you know. Now tell me in the comments, where are you watching from today? I want to know what corner of this beautiful, broken, extraordinary world you are sitting in right now. And if this story made you feel something, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because we are all just out here trying to show up, and sometimes a story reminds us that showing up is the bravest thing we will ever do.